Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about cheap employers, Elodie thought, as her ship screamed through Atmo with all the grace of a drunk elephant, is that they always spring for the budget engine parts. And budget engine parts, as she was currently discovering in vivid and terrifying detail, have this fun little quirk where they explode at exactly the worst possible moment. Wandering Det, you are breaking Atmo at unsafe velocity. Please adjust. Oh, please adjust, Elodie snarled at the automated distress channel, wrestling with controls that had about as much response as a dead fish. Sure, let me just adjust with my currently non-existent thrusters. Thanks for the tip. The moon rushed up to meet her. Purple landscape. Lovely. She was going to die, and the last thing she'd see would be lavender dirt. The universe had a sick sense of humor. She slammed what remained of her emergency retro rockets. The ship shuddered, groaned, and then hit the ground like a meteor with an attitude problem. Metal shrieked. Something exploded in the cargo bay. Elodie's head snapped forward, then back, and then the world turned into a carnival ride designed by sadists. When everything finally stopped moving, she was hanging upside down in her harness, blood rushing to her head, and someone's voice, her voice, she realized, was reciting a steady stream of profanity that would have made her old drill sergeant proud. "Okay," she gasped, hitting the harness release and crumpling to what was now the ceiling. "Okay, still alive. That's unexpected." She lay there for a moment, taking inventory. Arms, mobile, legs, functional, ribs, possibly bruised, but not stabbing her lungs, head, pounding but still attached. She'd had worse mornings, honestly. There was that time in basic when, no, focus, Elodie. The cockpit was a disaster. Sparking wires dangled like party streamers. The view screen had spiderwebbed into 1,000 cracks. And the smell, oh, the smell, like burning plastic and ozone and regret. She kicked open the emergency hatch and crawled out into purple twilight. The moon was cold. Not just chilly, not just brisk, but the kind of cold that reached through your flight suit and reminded your bones that space doesn't care about your comfort. The air was thin, too, breathable but unsatisfying, like trying to get full on rice cakes. Elodie stood up, surveyed her ship, her beautiful, beat-up, now absolutely destroyed ship, and laughed. It was either that or cry, and she'd stopped crying at age 9. "Well, Det," she said, patting the crumpled hull, "you really committed to the wandering part this time." The ship didn't answer. Rude, but understandable, given the whole being a wreck situation. She limped around to the cargo bay. The doors had buckled in the crash, leaving a gap she could squeeze through. Inside was darker than the inside of a black cat in a coal mine. She clicked on her wrist light and immediately wished she hadn't. The container, the one she'd been paid extremely well not to ask questions about, the one labeled biological specimens, handle with care, the one she'd been transporting to some research facility that was definitely doing legal and ethical things, had cracked open like an egg. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." 3 pairs of eyes reflected her light. Big eyes, yellow eyes, eyes that sat above a truly alarming number of teeth. The creatures were huddled in the corner of the container, pressed against each other in a fuzzy pile of terror and claws. They were small, maybe the size of large dogs, covered in thick fur that shimmered with bioluminescent spots in patterns that pulsed like anxious heartbeats. Their ears were flattened against skulls that were just slightly too predator-shaped to be cute. "Almost cute," she corrected. The jury was still out. They had paws, big paws, paws with retractable claws that she could see even from here because the claws were currently very much not retracted. One of them made a sound, a mewling whimper that hit her right in the part of her brain she'd been ignoring since childhood. "No," Elodie said firmly. "Absolutely not. I'm a cargo hauler, not a wildlife rescue. You're probably dangerous. You're definitely not my problem." The smallest one's spots flickered faster, its whole body shaking. "Ugh, don't do that. Don't do the pathetic thing." The creature whimpered again. Elodie turned around and walked away. She had priorities. Priority 1. Find the emergency beacon. Priority 2. Activate said beacon. Priority 3. Wait for rescue while not freezing to death. Nowhere in that list did it say, deal with terrifying predator babies. She made it about 20 steps before she heard them following her. Click, click, click of claws on metal. Soft, distressed sounds that were somehow both threatening and heartbreaking. She didn't look back. She wouldn't look back. She looked back. All 3 of them had climbed out of the container and were trailing behind her like the world's most dangerous ducklings. The smallest one, okay, she was going to call that one Menace because it kept trying to climb up her leg, bumped into the middle one, who hissed, which startled the biggest one into a full poof of fear, fur standing on end, making it look like a very scary dandelion. Despite everything, Elodie snorted. "You guys are the worst predators I've ever seen." They stared at her. She stared back. The temperature was dropping. She could see her breath now, and the cubs, because that's what they were, cubs, she could admit that much, were starting to shiver. Their spots pulsed erratically, out of sync, which she suspected was bad. The emergency locker was in the aft section. She headed there, and yes, fine. She walked slowly enough that the cubs could keep up. That didn't mean anything. That was just practical. If they died, she'd have dead cubs in her ship, and that would smell terrible. The locker was half crushed, but accessible. Inside, 2 thermal blankets, a medical kit, some ration bars that were probably older than she was, and the emergency beacon. She pulled out the beacon and activated it. Nothing happened. She shook it. Tried again. Still nothing. "Oh, come on!" She popped the casing. The inside looked like someone had taken a hammer to a circuit board. Of course, the one thing I need is broken. Why would the universe make this easy? Behind her, one of the cubs made a sound like a sneeze mixed with a growl. She turned to find them huddled together again, shivering hard now. Their eyes looked at her with something she really didn't want to interpret as trust. The ship's heating was gone. The temperature was still dropping. She checked her wrist display. -15 and falling. At this rate, by morning it would be -30, or worse. She could survive that in her flight suit. Maybe. For a while. The cubs couldn't. Elodie stood there, thermal blankets in hand, looking at 3 shivering furballs who absolutely were not her responsibility, who might grow up to eat her face, who represented every complication she'd spent her adult life avoiding. "I'm going to regret this," she muttered. She started dragging intact panels from the cargo bay to create a windbreak. The cubs watched her with those 2 intelligent eyes. Then the biggest one, Fang, she decided, because of the incisor that stuck out even when its mouth was closed, started dragging a panel too. "Hey, no, you don't have to." But Fang kept dragging, and then Bitey joined in, and suddenly she had very unhelpful help that mostly consisted of cubs getting tangled in things and tripping over their own paws. It took an hour to set up something resembling shelter. She used torn panels as walls, stretched one thermal blanket as a roof, and created a floor space just big enough for, well, for what she was absolutely not admitting she was planning. The cubs piled in immediately, and then just sat there, shivering and staring at her. "Right. So, here's the situation," Elodie said, sitting down at the entrance. "It's going to get colder. You need warmth. I have exactly one flight jacket, which is insulated, and one more thermal blanket, which is not enough for all of us." The cubs blinked at her. "I'm explaining this so you understand I'm making a choice here. A stupid choice. The kind of choice that gets people killed in survival situations." Menace crawled closer and put a paw on her boot. "Oh, you're good," Elodie breathed. "You're really good at the manipulation thing, aren't you?" She unzipped her flight jacket, the good one, the one she'd saved up for months to buy, the one that had kept her warm through a dozen bad situations. She spread it out on the floor. "Okay, in. Come on, get in." The cubs didn't move. "Seriously? Now you're going to be difficult?" She patted the jacket. "This is premium insulation. This cost me more than your container probably did. Get in." Fang ventured forward first, sniffing the jacket suspiciously. Then it stepped onto the fabric, circled once, twice, and flopped down with a huff. Bitey followed immediately, curling into Fang's side. Menace took longer, approaching in fits and starts, but eventually climbed onto the pile. Elodie wrapped the jacket around them like a burrito of teeth and claws. The effect was immediate. The cubs' shivering slowed. Their spots began to pulse in sync, a slow, steady rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Within minutes, they were asleep, breathing deeply, occasionally making small sounds that might have been predator snores. And Elodie was sitting on the metal floor in just her undershirt and cargo pants, with only the second thermal blanket between her and hypothermia. Smart, Elodie. Real smart. This is exactly the kind of decision-making that got you dishonorably discharged. She wrapped the thin blanket around herself and lay down on the freezing floor, as far from the cubs as the small shelter allowed. Which wasn't far. Which meant she could hear every breath they took, could see the gentle rise and fall of the jacket. The cold seeped through the blanket immediately. She curled into a ball, tucking her hands under her arms, and tried not to think about how many hours until dawn. The cubs slept on. Elodie shivered and stared at the makeshift ceiling and wondered when, exactly, her life had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of caring. Menace made a small sound in its sleep, a content little chirp, and shifted deeper into the jacket. Yeah, she was definitely going to regret this. The thing about freezing to death, Elodie discovered, is that it's incredibly boring. She'd expected drama, hallucinations maybe, profound thoughts about her life choices. Instead, she just lay there on the metal floor, shivering so hard her teeth clattered, thinking about absolutely nothing except how much she hated being cold. Hours crawled by. The temperature kept dropping. Her thin thermal blanket was about as effective as wrapping herself in tissue paper. She'd curl into a tighter ball, get marginally warmer, then her muscles would cramp and she'd have to shift, losing what little heat she'd accumulated. Meanwhile, 3 feet away, the predator cubs slept like, well, babies. Warm babies. Comfortable babies. Babies wrapped in her extremely expensive jacket. "This is fine," she whispered through chattering teeth. "This is totally fine. Character building. Makes you stronger. All that garbage." Fang snored. Actual snores. Like a chainsaw cutting through wet wood. "Oh, you're comfortable? That's great. So happy for you." She tried to sleep. Couldn't. Too cold. Her mind kept spinning. running through scenarios. How long until someone noticed her ship was missing? Probably not long. She was hauling cargo for a corporation that cared very much about its profits and very little about its employees. They'd send someone. Question was, would they send someone to rescue her, or someone to retrieve the cargo and leave her to freeze? Given her employer's track record, 50-50 odds at best. A sound outside the shelter made her freeze, and not from the cold this time. Something moving, something big, judging by the crunch of footsteps on frost. Elodie held her breath, listened. More footsteps, circling. Whatever it was taking its time, investigating the crash site. She slowly, carefully, reached for the plasma cutter she'd tucked into her boot. Not much of a weapon, but better than harsh language. The footsteps came closer to the shelter, stopped right outside. The cubs slept on, oblivious. Elodie's heart hammered. Every terrible possibility ran through her mind. The cubs' parent, coming to reclaim them? Some local predator, attracted by the crash? Corporate recovery team already? Long pause. Then the footsteps retreated, fading into the distance. She waited 5 full minutes before exhaling. Okay, she breathed. Okay, that was fun. Love that. Really enjoying this survival experience. But now she couldn't sleep at all. She kept replaying that sound, those footsteps. Something was out there. Something knew they were here. She sat up, pulled the blanket tighter, and resigned herself to keeping watch. That's when she really looked at the cubs. In sleep, they'd rearranged themselves into a tighter pile. Menace was sprawled across the other two like a furry tyrant. Bitey had one paw over Fang's face. Their spots pulsed together now, perfectly synchronized, a slow rhythm like a shared heartbeat. It was, she admitted reluctantly, kind of beautiful. Bioluminescence in shades of blue and green, painting patterns across fur that shifted from dark gray to almost silver. They looked like tiny galaxies, collapsed into purring bundles of potential violence. She noticed other details, too. The way their ears twitched in sleep, tracking sounds she couldn't hear. The retractable claws, currently sheathed but occasionally flexing in dreams. The teeth, so many teeth, designed for tearing meat. These weren't some domesticated species. These were apex predators, top of their food chain, built to hunt and kill. And they'd followed her like lost puppies. Menace shifted, and one paw stretched out from the jacket bundle, reaching across the space between them. It flexed once, twice, then settled with the paw just barely touching her hand. Elodie stared at that connection, that tiny point of contact, warm fur against her frozen fingers. She could move her hand. Should move her hand. Maintaining distance was survival 101. Don't attach. Don't get involved. Don't care, because caring gets you hurt. She'd learned that lesson early. Foster home to foster home, never staying long enough to matter, never letting anyone matter enough to hurt when they inevitably left or sent her away. By 15, she'd perfected the art of not caring. By 20, when she'd joined the military, she'd turned it into a lifestyle, and it had worked. Mostly. Right up until the incident that got her discharged, the one she didn't think about, the one involving a squad mate and a choice and consequences she still carried. Menace's paw was warm against her skin. She didn't move her hand. "You know what your problem is?" she whispered to the sleeping cubs. "You trust too easily. I could be anyone, could be dangerous. You don't know me." Fang's ear twitched at her voice but didn't wake. "I mean, I crashed your transport, destroyed your container, and now you're sleeping on my jacket like I'm, what, your mother?" That's terrible survival instinct. That's how you get killed in the real world. Bitey yawned in sleep, showing all those impressive teeth, then settled back down. Although, I guess you are just kids. Cubs, whatever. Not like you chose to be here. Someone put you in that container. Someone was transporting you somewhere. That was an uncomfortable thought. She'd been paid well not to ask questions about the cargo. Biological specimens could mean anything. Research subjects, exotic pets, breeding stock for a zoo, or something worse. The cold was making it hard to think clearly, but pieces were starting to connect in ways she didn't like. The excessive pay, the secrecy, the specific instructions not to open the container under any circumstances, the lack of proper life support setup. This wasn't a legal transport. She'd known that, obviously. Most of her jobs existed in the gray area between legal and very illegal. But usually it was smuggled goods, contraband tech, stuff that was illegal for boring regulatory reasons. This felt different. She looked at the cubs again. Really looked. Their builds were pure predator, sure, but they were also clearly intelligent. The way they'd helped her build the shelter, clumsy but purposeful. The way they'd understood her gestures. The synchronized spots, which suggested some kind of pack communication. "What are you?" she murmured. Menace's paw twitched against her hand, and the cub made a small sound, something between a purr and a whimper. Without thinking, Elodie ran her thumb across the soft fur. The cub settled immediately, spots pulsing slower, deeper sleep. And that's when it hit her. The warmth, not just from Menace's paw, but radiating from all three cubs. They were putting out heat like tiny furnaces. Of course, they were from somewhere. Some planet with its own climate, its own temperature range. They were adapted for something, and right now, bundled together in her jacket, they were generating significant warmth. Warmth that was going absolutely nowhere except into the air. Elodie did some quick mental math. Her options: stay here and freeze slowly while the cubs stayed comfortable, or, you know what? No. Nope. I gave you the jacket. I'm taking the heat. That's fair. That's equality. She scooted closer to the cub pile. The difference was immediate. Even a foot closer, she could feel the warmth radiating off them. The cubs didn't stir. She moved closer still until she was right next to the jacket bundle. Heat washed over her like a blessing. Her shivering started to slow. "Okay," she said quietly. "Here's the deal. I'm going to just, sort of, be near you. For warmth. Purely tactical. This doesn't mean anything." She lay down, curling on her side, close enough to feel their body heat, but not touching. The temperature difference was incredible. She could actually feel her fingers again. Minutes passed. The cold that had been eating into her bones started to retreat. Menace made another sound and shifted, somehow managing to scoot the entire jacket bundle closer to her. Now Fang's back was pressed against her stomach. "Hey, I didn't say you could..." But the warmth... Oh, the warmth was glorious. "Fine, but we're not cuddling. This is a mutually beneficial survival arrangement." Bitey rolled over and ended up with its head on her arm. "That's not... I didn't give you permission to..." All three cubs were touching her now. And all three were radiating heat like small suns. And her flight jacket was big enough that, if she really didn't move much, she could kind of tuck herself partially under it too. Elodie lasted about 30 seconds before giving in and pulling part of the jacket over herself. The cubs, feeling the shift, instinctively bundled closer. Suddenly, she was in the middle of a warm, purring, definitely going to eat someone someday pile of predators. And for the first time in hours, she wasn't cold. "This is still tactical," she informed them. "Strategic resource sharing, nothing more." Menace put its head on her shoulder and sighed contentedly. Despite everything, despite the crash and the cold and the mysterious footsteps and the extremely uncertain future, Elodie felt herself relaxing. Her muscles unclenched, her breathing slowed. The cub's synchronized pulse of bioluminescence was hypnotic, washing the small shelter in gentle waves of blue-green light. She should stay awake, keep watch. Something was out there. But she was so warm now, and so tired. And the cubs were breathing in that steady rhythm, and Menace's paw was still on her hand. And when had she last felt this? Safe. The word came unbidden. She felt safe, which was ridiculous. She was crashed on an unknown moon with 3 predator cubs, no working beacon, no way home, and something potentially dangerous circling her position. But the cubs trusted her completely, slept without fear, and somehow that made her feel like maybe, possibly, she could trust them too. "Just for a little while," she whispered. "I'll just rest for a minute." Her eyes closed. The cubs slept on, warm and content. And Elodie, for the first time since childhood, fell asleep feeling like she wasn't alone. Dawn came slowly, the purple sky lightening to lavender, then pale violet. Elodie woke to find herself completely buried under cubs. Menace was on her chest. Bitey was curled against her side. Fang had somehow ended up using her leg as a pillow. All 3 were awake and staring at her with those 2 intelligent yellow eyes. "Morning," she croaked. Menace licked her face with a tongue that felt like sandpaper. "Okay, gross, we're not doing that." She sat up, dislodging cubs, who tumbled off her with indignant sounds. They shook themselves, stretched in ways that showed off impressive flexibility and those retractable claws, then immediately started play-fighting with each other. Elodie watched them wrestle, all teeth and mock growls, and couldn't help smiling. Then she remembered the footsteps from last night and stopped smiling. She crawled out of the shelter into frigid morning air. Frost covered everything in a glittering layer, and there, in that frost, were tracks, big tracks, multiple sets, circling the crash site, approaching the shelter, then retreating. Whatever had visited in the night, there had been more than one, and they'd gotten close, very close. Elodie's blood ran cold, and not from the temperature. The cubs tumbled out of the shelter behind her, playing and completely oblivious to danger. She looked at them, then at the tracks, then back at the cubs. "Okay," she said quietly. "New plan. We're not just waiting for rescue anymore. We're figuring out what you are, why someone was transporting you, and what those things were last night." Fang tilted its head at her, one ear up, one ear down. "And then we're getting off this moon before whatever made those tracks comes back." Menace pounced on her boot, growling playfully. Elodie sighed. "But first, I guess we're finding you breakfast, because I'm not dealing with hungry predator cubs. That's where I draw the line." She headed back to the ship, 3 cubs bouncing along behind her, and tried very hard not to think about how quickly she'd gone from "not my problem" to making plans that included "we" instead of "I." Too late for that now. Way, way too late. The ship's emergency rations, Elodie discovered, were not designed for feeding apex predator cubs. The nutrient bars she offered were sniffed, licked once, and then completely ignored. Menace even tried to bury one under a piece of debris, which was both insulting and slightly hilarious. "Okay, fine. You're carnivores. Of course you are. Because nothing about this situation could be simple." She scrounged through the cargo bay, looking for anything edible. Most of the supplies had been destroyed in the crash, but she found a few sealed containers of protein paste meant for long-haul flights. She squeezed some onto a panel and offered it to Fang. The cub approached cautiously, sniffed, then started licking it up with enthusiasm. The other two immediately mobbed the panel, shouldering each other out of the way, making sounds that were half purr, half growl. Yeah, that's what I thought. Not picky, just particular. While they ate, she searched the wreckage more thoroughly. She needed information, needed to understand what she was dealing with. The cargo manifest would be in the ship's computer, if the computer hadn't been turned into expensive scrap. It took 20 minutes of crawling through twisted metal and sparking wires, but she found the main terminal. Half the screen was dead, but the other half flickered to life when she powered it up. Come on, give me something. The manifest loaded. Biological specimens, classified, destination, Helix Station. Corporate client, Unified Bio Group. Contents, 3 juvenile specimens, species designation. The text was corrupted. She could only make out fragments. Rare, homeworld strip mined, last viable breeding group. Value exceeds. The rest was garbage data. Homeworld strip mined, Elodie repeated slowly. Last viable breeding group. She looked back at the cubs, who had finished eating and were now investigating a piece of hull plating with great intensity. Bitey was trying to flip it over. Menace was chewing on the corner. Fang was sitting on top of it like a small, furry king. You're not just valuable. You're irreplaceable. A new sound cut through the morning air, a sound she knew too well. Engine wash. Incoming ship. Elodie's military instincts kicked in immediately. She killed the terminal, grabbed her plasma cutter, and scanned the sky. There, coming in fast from the east, a sleek vessel. Corporate design. Not a rescue ship, a recovery ship. Inside, now, she hissed at the cubs. They looked at her, curious but not alarmed. I said now! Something in her tone must have translated, because all 3 of them bolted for the shelter. She followed, her mind racing. They'd found her way too fast, which meant they'd been tracking the cargo, not the ship, which meant they had very, very expensive merchandise they wanted back. The ship landed with precision about 100 feet from the crash site. The airlock hissed open. 2 figures emerged. The first was insectoid, maybe 6 feet tall, with a carapace that shimmered oil-slick colors in the weak sunlight. 4 arms, each ending in delicate manipulators. Compound eyes that saw everything. Quelnith, based on the species markers. The second was reptilian, built like a tank, with scales that looked like armor plating. Carried a weapon that was definitely not standard issue. Definitely military grade. Fesenar, and not the friendly kind. They approached the crash site with the casual confidence of people who did this often. Elodie stepped out of the shelter to meet them, plasma cutter tucked behind her back. Good morning, she called out, putting on her best harmless cargo hauler smile. Boy, am I glad to see you folks. I've been... Where are the specimens? Quelnith interrupted, voice like wind chimes made of knives. So much for playing dumb. The what now? The biological cargo. 3 juveniles. Container was registered to this vessel. Quelnith's compound eyes focused on her with unsettling intensity. Where are they? Oh, those. Yeah, funny story. The container broke in the crash. Whatever was in there must have, wandered off. Probably froze to death last night. It got pretty cold. Fesenar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Nothing in that container would freeze. Stop wasting our time, human. I'm not. We have thermal scanners, Quelnith said flatly. We know they're in that shelter behind you. We know you're alive. We know you've been in contact with them. Move aside. Elodie didn't move. Look, I'm just a pilot. I crashed. I survived. Whatever happens to your cargo isn't my problem. You want them? Go ahead. Take them. I won't stop you. And she meant it. Or she tried to mean it. She was saying the words, the smart words, the words that would keep her alive. Quelnith moved toward the shelter. Behind Elodie, she heard a small sound. A whimper. Menace, probably. Scared by the strangers. However, Elodie heard herself say, I should warn you, they're pretty shaken up. Scared. Might react badly if you just grab them. We have experience handling merchandise, Fesnar said, pulling out a device that looked disturbingly like a shock prod. Merchandise. The word hit her wrong. Quelnith reached the shelter entrance and peered inside. There you are. Come out. Time to go. The cubs didn't move. Elodie could see them from where she stood, huddled together at the back of the shelter, spots pulsing fast and erratic. Scared. They're not coming out, she said. They don't know you. They don't need to know us, Fesnar said. He activated the shock prod. They need to comply. He ducked into the shelter. Elodie heard the zap of electricity, then a sound she'd never heard the cubs make before. A shriek of pain. Everything inside her went very, very quiet. She'd heard that sound before. Different creature, different place, but the same tone. Pain. Confusion. Why are you hurting me? She was 12 years old again, in her 5th foster home, watching the family dog get kicked for being in the way. She'd tried to intervene, got punished for it. Learned the lesson. Don't interfere. Keep your head down. Survive. She was 19 in basic, watching a drill sergeant brutalize a recruit for sport. She'd stayed silent. That was the smart play, the safe play. She was 23, watching her squad mate get left behind because saving him wasn't tactically sound. She'd followed orders, right up until she hadn't, right up until she'd gone back, against orders, and gotten them both out alive, and gotten herself discharged for insubordination. Some lessons you learn, some lessons you unlearn. Fesnar emerged from the shelter, dragging Bitey by the scruff. The cub was convulsing from the shock, whimpering, its spots flickering wildly. Elodie looked at that cub, that terrified, hurting cub who'd slept curled against her side just hours ago. Yeah, she said quietly. No. Excuse me? Quelnith turned those compound eyes on her. I said no. New plan? You're leaving. Without them. Fesnar laughed again. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? She didn't have a weapon. Didn't have backup. Didn't have a plan. Didn't have anything except a plasma cutter designed for cutting metal, not fighting armed corporate recovery specialists. But she'd been in worse spots. And she'd learned a long time ago that being outgunned just meant you had to be smarter. You're one human, Quelnith said, almost gently. We are professionals. The specimens are worth more than your life. Do the math. Oh, I've done the math, Elodie said. And here's the thing about math. It doesn't account for crazy. She pulled the plasma cutter and fired it not at them, but at the support strut holding up a section of her ship's hull. The metal shrieked, glowed orange, and collapsed. Fesnar had to dive out of the way as several tons of debris crashed down exactly where he'd been standing. He dropped Bitey, who scrambled back toward the shelter. You're insane, Quelnith shouted. Yeah, well, I got dishonorably discharged for a reason. Elodie was already moving, using the falling debris as cover, cutting another support. You want merchandise? Come get it. More hull plating fell. She'd spent months on this ship, knew every weak point, every structural vulnerability. And she'd been a demolitions expert. She knew how to make things fall down. Fesnar fired his weapon. Energy blast scorched past her head. She rolled, came up cutting, and a cargo container toppled, forcing him to retreat. "The specimens!" Quelnith was shouting. "Don't damage the specimens!" That was her advantage. They needed the cubs alive and intact. She just needed them gone. She cut through a fuel line. Not the main one, that would explode. Just the auxiliary, enough to spray flammable liquid across the ground between them. "You're destroying your own ship!" Fesnar roared. "It's already destroyed!" She fired the plasma cutter at the fuel puddle. It ignited with a whoosh, a wall of flames springing up. Not hot enough to hurt anyone, but definitely hot enough to make them think twice about crossing. Through the flames, she saw Quelnith making calculations. Saw the moment the alien decided this wasn't worth it. "Fall back," Quelnith ordered. "We'll return with proper equipment." "And authorization to terminate the human," Fesnar added, glaring at her through the fire. They retreated to their ship. Elodie kept the plasma cutter trained on them until they were inside and the airlock sealed. The ship lifted off, engines screaming, and shot into the sky. Elodie waited until it was completely gone before lowering her weapon. Her hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash. She recognized it. She'd just made an extremely powerful enemy. They'd come back, with more people, better weapons, and they'd be very, very unhappy. Behind her, 3 cubs crept out of the shelter. Bitey was still shaking from the shock. Elodie knelt down, and the cub came to her immediately, pressing against her legs, whimpering. "Hey, you're okay. You're okay now." She checked the cub over. No burns, thankfully. The shock prod had been set low, meant to stun, not injure. Still terrifying for a cub, though. Fang and Menace crowded close too, all of them seeking contact, reassurance. I know. That was scary. And stupid. What she'd just done was phenomenally stupid. She'd assaulted corporate recovery specialists, destroyed evidence, interfered with a legal salvage operation. Except it wasn't legal, was it? She headed back to the ship's computer, cubs trailing behind her. The terminal was still functional. She dug deeper into the corrupted files, piecing together fragments. Species designation, Lunath. Homeworld, Lunathar. Status, extinct. Planetary ecosystem, destroyed by mining operations. Survivors, 3 juveniles, last viable breeding population. Corporate notes, specimens valuable for exotic pet trade. Unique bioluminescent properties. Aggressive nature can be suppressed through conditioning. Estimated value per specimen? The number made her sick. Exotic pets, she said flatly. They were going to sell you as pets. Fang headbutted her leg. Your whole species is gone. Your planet is gone. And they were going to sell you. More files. She kept digging. Found shipping manifests. Found other transports. Found a whole network of illegal wildlife trafficking that Unified Biogroup was running. Found evidence that would bring down a corporate empire. And then she found something else. In the container specs, there was a data chip, a physical chip, embedded in the container's locking mechanism for inventory tracking. She ran back to the cargo bay, to the broken container, and started searching. The cubs watched her, curious. There, a small chip, barely bigger than her thumbnail, wedged into the lock assembly. She pried it out. Back to the terminal. She plugged it in. New files flooded the screen. Everything. Complete species profile, genetic data, breeding protocols, and a full record of how Unified Biogroup had strip-mined the Lunath homeworld, driving the species to extinction, then salvaged the last breeding group to sell. "This is it," she breathed. This is everything. This could destroy them. The cubs had followed her again, all three of them pressed against her legs, seeking warmth and contact. She looked down at them, at three orphans who'd lost everything, who trusted her anyway. They're coming back, she told them. You understand? Those aliens, they're coming back with friends, and I can't fight them all? Menace chirped at her. I could run. Take their ship when they come back, steal it, get out of here, leave you. That would be smart. Bitey made a questioning sound. That's what I should do. It's the logical choice, the survival choice. Fang looked up at her with those yellow eyes, spots pulsing slow and steady. Trusting. Elodie closed her eyes, took a breath, made a choice. Or, she said, I could do something really, really stupid. Again. She pulled up the communication system. Most of it was fried, but the emergency broadcast function still worked. She could send out a wide-band distress call. It would reach anyone in range, including the Interstellar Conservation Coalition. The good guys, chronically underfunded, constantly fighting corporate interests, but actually dedicated to protecting endangered species. She started composing the message, attached every file from the data chip, added her own testimony about what had happened, what she'd witnessed. To anyone receiving this, she recorded, my name is Elodie. I'm on an uncharted moon with 3 cubs from an extinct species. Unified Biogroup is coming to collect them. They plan to sell them. I have evidence of their crimes. I need help. Coordinates attached. If your Conservation Coalition or Interstellar Marshals or anyone who actually gives a damn about living things more than profit, I need you here. Soon. Because I can't protect them alone. She paused, then added, and if you're corporate, if you're coming to take these cubs, know this. I was military demolitions. I know 14 ways to make this wreckage explode, and I will take this whole site down before I let you have them. Try me. She hit send. The message broadcasted on all frequencies, bouncing off satellites, spreading across the system. And now, all she could do was wait. The cubs were playing again, resilient in that way only young things can be. Menace was pouncing on frost crystals. Bitey was stalking Fang, who was pretending not to notice. Elodie sat down and watched them, pulled her jacket closer around her shoulders. The same jacket they'd slept on last night. So here's the thing, she said to them, to herself, to the universe. I'm probably going to die defending you. That's the most likely outcome. Corporate goons versus one washed-up pilot with anger issues. The math isn't good. Menace abandoned the frost crystals and climbed into her lap. But you know what? I've been running my whole life. From foster homes, from the military, from anything that required me to care. And I'm tired. Bitey joined Menace, curling up against her side. So yeah, this is my line. This is where I stop running. Fang settled down too, completing the pile. All 3 cubs, warm and trusting, using her as their personal furniture. Elodie wrapped her arms around them and looked up at the purple sky. Come on then, she whispered. Let's see what I'm made of. 4 hours. That's how long Elodie had before Fessinar and Quelnith returned with reinforcements. She spent 3 of them building traps. Pressure plates rigged to collapse debris. Tripwires connected to fuel canisters. Every dirty trick she'd learned in demolitions, implemented with salvaged ship parts and spite. The cubs helped, mostly by getting in the way and occasionally triggering things prematurely. Menace, no, don't step on the... The trap went off, spraying harmless sparks. Menace pounced on them. You're going to get us killed, Elodie muttered, resetting the mechanism. Hour 4 arrived with the sound of engines. Not 2 ships this time. 5. Elodie's stomach dropped. Okay, that's not great. She positioned herself between the shelter and the incoming ships, plasma cutter in one hand, detonator in the other. The Cubs flanked her, spots pulsing fast. They knew something was wrong. The ships landed in formation. Airlock doors opened, armored figures emerged, weapons ready. Quelnith stepped forward. Last chance, human. Surrender the specimens. Yeah, that's not happening. You can't win this. Probably not. But I can make it expensive. She raised the detonator. Half the traps around the crash site armed with a single button press. Quelnith hesitated. That's when the sky lit up with new engine signatures. Big ones. A massive ship descended, Conservation Coalition markings clear on its hull. Beside it, 3 smaller vessels with interstellar marshal insignias. Elodie's knees almost buckled with relief. What? Quelnith started. Oh, did I forget to mention? Elodie grinned. I sent your files to everyone. Every crime. Every illegal transport. It's been broadcasting on loop for the last 3 hours. You're famous. The Marshal ships landed, armed personnel pouring out. Unified Bio Group operatives, you're under arrest, amplified voices announced. The corporate team didn't even try to fight. They knew when they were beaten. Within an hour, the Cubs were being loaded into proper conservation transport pods, humane and temperature-controlled. Menace looked back at Elodie, spots flickering uncertainly. You're okay, she called out. They'll take care of you. A coalition officer approached. That was incredibly reckless. Yeah, I get that a lot. We could use someone like you. Wildlife protection and transport. Interested? Elodie looked at the Cubs one last time. Looked at her ruined ship. Looked at her plasma cutter. Actually, she said slowly, yeah, I think I am. Later, on the coalition ship, she slept in an actual bunk. Her flight jacket folded under her head as a pillow. It still smelled like predator cubs and second chances. She smiled in her sleep.